my hero in the game. He had a thunder sword, as you can see. He was leading groups of 40 people, and he was defeating the biggest dragons. So he was doing quite well. Until one day, he had a little bit of a breakdown. And he told us that while he'd been building up status and performance in the game environment, his life outside of the game had actually been suffering. He did not do so well in school, he did not see his friends outside of the game anymore, and he was not participating in any sports anymore. So is he addicted? That's an interesting question. If we look at media reports, we tend to see very negative impressions of video games. And more often than not, they also attribute the cause to a single party. Either the parents should be controlling their children better, the video game industry is simply making these massively addictive games and they should know better, or the children themselves simply lack willpower and it's their own fault, you know, control yourself. So that's three perspectives on that subject. Well, from my background as a gamer and a researcher myself, I have some information on the subject. And, well, firstly, some hard data. We did research in a group of 14-year-old students and looked at their gaming behavior, basically. And what you see is that, first of all, not all of these kids are actually playing games. Some of them don't play. And this is less and less every year, of course. But if they do play, some of them don't play the online games that are played with others. And it is specifically these games which are played with other people, which are incredibly time-consuming and most often associated with problems. So if you play these online games, you don't have to play them for extensive amounts of time. So we look at that as well. And if you remove those players who only play for maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours every night, or not even every night, you end up with a group of approximately 7% who play 4 or more hours per day. So that's what they report anyway. But playing extensively, if you're still doing quite well in school, maybe because you're smart or otherwise doing well, doesn't necessarily mean you have an addiction, right? So we can look at, are these people actually reporting addictive symptoms? Are they having problems controlling their behavior? Do they want to be playing less, and are they unsuccessful in doing so? Are they experiencing problems with homework and going to bed in the evening? Well, you already see it coming. That's only 1% who actually reports that. So, small problem, nothing to worry about, perhaps. On the other hand, if you look at it from the perspective of the heavy online gamers who are playing 4 or more hours per day, 1 in 7 of them is actually experiencing problems. So most of the intensive gamers will actually know somebody in their group of friends who's not entirely happy with their own playing behavior. So that's another perspective on the same numbers. Now from the perspective of the parents, very often the reaction tends to be extremely restrictive. And one thing you hear a lot is unplug the computer, switch off the router, hide away the console at night, just get it out of there. And actually, from a psychological point of view, and based on our research data as well, extremely controlling parenting can be very counterproductive. It actually elicits defiant behavior on the part of the child, and they end up playing more or being generally frustrated. So that's not a very helpful approach for the parents. And looking at the game industry, you might be tempted to think that they crank out addictive game after addictive game, or so it seems. Well, actually, it's quite hard to make a good game, and many companies fail. However, obviously, a small group of companies does succeed in reaching a large audience. And if they do, they gain access to an incredible player base and sophisticated tools to monitor players' behavior. So small changes they make in the game, and they can do that, might result in millions of people playing, for example, 15 minutes more on a daily basis. So that's a very real and hard influence they have over people's behavior. And well, if you want information that they're actually capable of this, look at notification systems or try to fill the first level of Candy Crush. It's pretty much impossible. So, but I think that the lesson to take away from this is that if you have this power over people's behavior, there's a certain responsibility attached to that. And that's a debate we're often not having. So looking at it from the perspective of the gamers themselves, well, they're often angry. They feel misunderstood. And one person I know is a professional gamer called Sushilicious. He's fairly good at StarCraft 2, so he plays a lot. And his parents were always complaining about his gaming behavior. They referred to it as him junking away behind the computer, until one day a taxi cab showed up to drive him away to Korea. And yeah, so his parents were fairly surprised. And that's the moment they realized that this hobby actually extends beyond the boundaries of the bedroom. And not every culture thinks about it in the same manner. So yeah, everybody become a pro gamer, perhaps? Well, unfortunately, it's rather hard to do that. It's like winning the lottery. So many people will not be able to become a professional gamer, and that's not something you would recommend to people. And what Leonard is now actually, after retiring as a professional gamer, is actually involved in is promoting responsible gaming. So enjoying the gaming behavior, but also keeping it in balance with the rest of your life. Now to summarize these three perspectives, what we see for the parents is they tend to become angry, they blow up, they become larger and larger, and they start destroying things. So what does that remind of us? Well, the Hulk, basically. And that's not an optimal position, I think. Maybe they could try to be a little bit more like Iron Man, who is fairly interested in technology and always tinkering with it. So for the parents, open YouTube, see what your child is playing, and dive right in there from a position of genuine interest. Looking at the position of the video game industry, I would argue that with enormous power over human behavior comes some responsibility, pretty much like Spider-Man. And from the gamers' position themselves, they're often in their cubicle, gaming, feeling angry. Well, what would really help is if you would come out of the cubicle every once in a while and do some advocacy. Explain to people what you're actually doing, why it is meaningful for you, and also why sometimes it's not as much fun as you would expect. So that can be helpful there. And to summarize the overall picture, there has always been panic about new media. When radios first appeared, people thought, well, those persons are never leaving the house anymore. They'll be listening to radio indoors all day. Big concerns. Television, the same. Now we have gaming, and in a few years we'll have virtual reality, no doubt. But also for the gaming, we do see that some people are sensitive to fleeing into these online worlds, spending a little bit too much time. It functions basically like a fish trap. The further you go in, the more committed you become to your online status and your online friends, the less well you sometimes do in the surrounding environment. So that's an issue. So what can you do? Well, maybe you know somebody, or you will encounter somebody who plays a little bit too much, and then it's your job to reach out. Talk to that person about their hobbies. Inquire in an honest and non-judgmental way what they're actually doing. And most optimally, get them out of the house for some board games or drinks. And maybe, just maybe, you might prevent them from swimming into the fish trap a little bit too far. Thank you.
When Dorothy was a little girl, she was fascinated by her goldfish. Her father explained to her that fish swim by quickly wagging their tails to propel themselves through the water. Without hesitation, little Dorothy responded, "Yes, Daddy, and fish swim backwards by wagging their heads." In her mind, it was a fact as true as any other. Fish swim backwards by wagging their heads. She believed it. Our lives are full of fish swimming backwards. We make assumptions and faulty leaps of logic. We harbor bias. We know that we are right and they are wrong. We fear the worst. We strive for unattainable perfection. We tell ourselves what we can and cannot do. In our minds, fish swim by in reverse, frantically wagging their heads, and we don't even notice them. I'm going to tell you 5 facts about myself. One fact is not true. 1, I graduated from Harvard at 19 with an honors degree in mathematics. 2, I currently run a construction company in Orlando. 3, I starred on a television sitcom. 4, I lost my sight to a rare genetic eye disease. 5, I served as a law clerk to 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices. Which fact's not true? Actually, they're all true. Yeah, they're all true. At this point, most people really only care about the television show. I know this from experience. Okay, so the show was NBC's Saved by the Bell, the new class, and I played Weasel Wiesel, who was the sort of dorky, nerdy character on the show, which made it a very major acting challenge for me as a 13-year-old boy. Now, did you struggle with number 4, my blindness? Why is that? We make assumptions about so-called disabilities. As a blind man, I confront others' incorrect assumptions about my abilities every day. My point today is not about my blindness, however. It's about my vision. Going blind taught me to live my life eyes wide open. It taught me to spot those backward swimming fish that our minds create. Going blind casts them into focus. What does it feel like to see? It's immediate and passive. You open your eyes and there's the world. Seeing is believing, sight is truth, right? Well, that's what I thought. Then, from age 12 to 25, my retinas progressively deteriorated. My sight became an increasingly bizarre carnival funhouse hall of mirrors and illusions. The salesperson I was relieved to spot in a store was really a mannequin. Reaching down to wash my hands, I suddenly saw it was a urinal I was touching, not a sink, when my fingers felt its true shape. A friend described the photograph in my hand, and only then I could see the image depicted. Objects appeared, morphed, and disappeared in my reality. It was difficult and exhausting to see. I pieced together fragmented, transitory images, consciously analyzed the clues, searched for some logic in my crumbling kaleidoscope, until I saw nothing at all. I learned that what we see is not universal truth. It is not objective reality. What we see is a unique, personal, virtual reality that is masterfully constructed by our brain. Let me explain with a bit of amateur neuroscience. Your visual cortex takes up about 30% of your brain. That's compared to approximately 8% for touch and 2 to 3% for hearing. Every second, your eyes can send your visual cortex as many as 2 billion pieces of information. The rest of your body can send your brain only an additional billion. So sight is 1/3 of your brain by volume and can claim about 2/3 of your brain's processing resources. It's no surprise then that the illusion of sight is so compelling. But make no mistake about it, sight is an illusion. Here's where it gets interesting. To create the experience of sight, your brain references your conceptual understanding of the world, other knowledge, your memories, opinions, emotions, mental attention, all of these things, and far more, are linked in your brain to your sight. These linkages work both ways and usually occur subconsciously. So, for example, what you see impacts how you feel, And the way you feel can literally change what you see. Numerous studies demonstrate this. If you are asked to estimate the walking speed of a man in a video, for example, your answer will be different if you're told to think about cheetahs or turtles. A hill appears steeper if you've just exercised, and a landmark appears farther away if you're wearing a heavy backpack. We have arrived at a fundamental contradiction. What you see is a complex mental construction of your own making, but you experience it passively as a direct representation of the world around you. You create your own reality and you believe it. I believed mine until it broke apart. The deterioration of my eyes shattered the illusion. You see, sight is just one way we shape our reality. We create our own realities in many other ways. Let's take fear as just one example. Your fears distort your reality. Under the warped logic of fear, anything is better than the uncertain. Fear fills the void at all costs, passing off what you dread for what you know, offering up the worst in place of the ambiguous, substituting assumption for reason. Psychologists have a great term for it, awfulizing. Right? Fear replaces the unknown with the awful. Now, fear is self-realizing. When you face the greatest need to look outside yourself and think critically, fear beats a retreat deep inside your mind, shrinking and distorting your view, drowning your capacity for critical thought with a flood of disruptive emotions. When you face a compelling opportunity to take action, fear lulls you into inaction, enticing you to passively watch its prophecies fulfill themselves. When I was diagnosed with my blinding disease, I knew blindness would ruin my life. Blindness was a death sentence for my independence. It was the end of achievement for me. Blindness meant I would live an unremarkable life, small and sad, and likely alone. I knew it. This was a fiction born of my fears, but I believed it. It was a lie, but it was my reality, just like those backward swimming fish in little Dorothy's mind. If I had not confronted the reality of my fear, I would have lived it. I am certain of that. So, how do you live your life eyes wide open? It is a learned discipline. It can be taught. It can be practiced. I'll summarize very briefly. Hold yourself accountable for every moment, every thought, every detail. See beyond your fears, recognize your assumptions, harness your internal strength, silence your internal critic, correct your misconceptions about luck and about success, accept your strengths and your weaknesses and understand the difference. Open your hearts to your bountiful blessings. Your fears, your critics, your heroes, your villains, they are your excuses, rationalizations, shortcuts, justifications, your surrender. They are fictions you perceive as reality. Choose to see through them. Choose to let them go. You are the creator of your reality. With that empowerment comes complete responsibility. I chose to step out of fear's tunnel into terrain uncharted and undefined. I chose to build there a blessed life. Far from alone, I share my beautiful life with Dorothy, my beautiful wife, with our triplets, whom we call the Tripskis, and with the latest addition to the family, sweet baby Clementine. What do you fear? What lies do you tell yourself? How do you embellish your truth and write your own fictions? What reality are you creating for yourself? In your career and personal life, in your relationships, and in your heart and soul, your backward swimming fish do you great harm. They exact a toll in missed opportunities and unrealized potential, and they engender insecurity and distrust where you seek fulfillment and connection. I urge you to search them out. Helen Keller said that the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. For me, going blind was a profound blessing. because blindness gave me vision. I hope you can see what I see. Thank you.
Isaac, before you leave the stage, just a question. Sure. This is an audience of entrepreneurs, of doers, of innovators. You are a CEO of a company down in Florida, and many are probably wondering, how is it to be a blind CEO? What kind of specific challenges do you have, and how do you overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge became a blessing. I don't get visual feedback from people.
Was a noise there?
Yeah. So, for example, in my leadership team meetings, I don't see facial expressions or gestures. I've learned to solicit a lot more verbal feedback. I basically, force people to tell me what they think. And in this respect, it's become, like I said, a real blessing for me personally and for my company, because we communicate at a far deeper level, we avoid ambiguities, and most important, my team knows that what they think truly matters.
Isaac, thank you for coming to TED.
Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you.
I'm Jane McGonigal. I'm a game designer. I've been making games online now for 10 years, and my goal for the next decade is to try to make it as easy to save the world in real life as it is to save the world in online games. Now, I have a plan for this, and it entails convincing more people, including all of you, to spend more time playing bigger and better games. Right now, we spend 3 billion hours a week playing online games. Some of you might be thinking, that's a lot of time to spend playing games, maybe too much time, considering how many urgent problems we have to solve in the real world. But actually, according to my research at the Institute for the Future, it's actually the opposite is true. 3 billion hours a week is not nearly enough gameplay to solve the world's most urgent problems. In fact, I believe that if we want to survive the next century on this planet, we need to increase that total dramatically. I've calculated the total we need at 21 billion hours of gameplay every week. So that's probably a bit of a counterintuitive idea, so I'll say it again, let it sink in. If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am. Here's why. This picture pretty much sums up why I think games are so essential to the future survival of the human species. Truly. This is a portrait by a photographer named Phil Toledano. He wanted to capture the emotion of gaming, so he set up a camera in front of gamers while they were playing. And this is a classic gaming emotion. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance in this photo. You probably see the sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration, deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. If you are a gamer, you will notice a few nuances here. The crinkle of the eyes up and around the mouth is a sign of optimism. And the eyebrows up is surprise. This is a gamer who's on the verge of something called an epic win. Now, oh, you've heard of that. Okay, good. So we have some gamers among us. So an epic win is an outcome that is so extraordinarily positive, you had no idea it was even possible until you achieved it. It was almost beyond the threshold of imagination. And when you get there, you are shocked to discover what you're truly capable of. That's an epic win. This is a gamer on the verge of an epic win. And this is the face that we need to see on millions of problem solvers all over the world as we try to tackle the obstacles of the next century. The face of someone who, against all odds, is on the verge of an epic win. Now, unfortunately, this is more of the face that we see in everyday life now as we try to tackle urgent problems. This is what I call the I'm not good at life face. And this is actually me making it. Can you see it? Yes, good. This is actually me making the I'm not good at life face. This is a piece of graffiti in my old neighborhood in Berkeley, California, where I did my PhD on why we're better in games than we are in real life. And this is a problem that a lot of gamers have. We feel that we are not as good in reality as we are in games. And I don't mean just good as in successful, although that's part of it. We do achieve more in game worlds. But I also mean good as in motivated to do something that matters, inspired to collaborate and to cooperate. When we're in game worlds, I believe that many of us become the best version of ourselves, the most likely to help at a moment's notice, the most likely to stick with a problem as long as it takes, to get up after failure and try again. And in real life, when we face failure, when we confront obstacles, we often don't feel that way. We feel overcome, we feel overwhelmed, we feel anxious, maybe depressed, frustrated, or cynical. We never have those feelings when we're playing games. They just don't exist in games. So that's what I wanted to study when I was a graduate student. What about games makes it impossible to feel that we can't achieve everything?